At exactly 9:23 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on January 15th, 2026, something unprecedented happened in a basement conference room of the Social Security Administration building in Baltimore. A meeting that wasn't supposed to exist, discussing numbers that weren't supposed to be calculated, reaching conclusions that weren't supposed to be shared with anyone outside that room. The 2026 trustee report had been completed 3 months early, and the mathematics were worse than anyone had prepared for. The timing wasn't coincidental. With presidential campaigns accelerating and congressional races intensifying, the administration needed to understand exactly how catastrophic the numbers would look when officially released. They needed to calculate whether the crisis could be managed through the election cycle or whether it would detonate in the middle of political campaigns. The answer, delivered in clinical actuarial language, was unambiguous. The Social Security system would reach mathematical insolvency in 2033, exactly 7 years away. But the real crisis wasn't 7 years in the future. It was happening now. 67 million Americans receive Social Security benefits today. They represent the largest demographic bloc in American politics, the most reliable voters, the citizens who built the post-war economy, and expect the promises made to them to be honored. They wake up each morning assuming their monthly checks will continue arriving, their cost of living adjustments will protect them from inflation, their healthcare supplements will remain affordable. They have no idea that the system supporting their survival is mathematically doomed. The numbers are simple and brutal. Social Security operates on a pay-as-you-go basis. Current workers fund current retirees through payroll taxes. In 1950, 16 workers supported each retiree. Today, 2.8 workers support each retiree. By 2033, that ratio will drop to 2.3 workers per retiree. The mathematics are inexorable. Fewer workers, more retirees, longer lifespans, higher medical costs. The trust fund that was supposed to bridge demographic transitions will be exhausted. What remains are current payroll taxes that can fund only 77% of promised benefits. But the 23% benefit reduction scheduled for 2033 represents just the beginning of a crisis that extends far beyond Social Security accounting. 67 million Americans who planned retirement finances around specific benefit levels will face immediate 23% income reductions. Social Security provides 90% of income for 40% of elderly Americans. A 23% benefit cut doesn't represent financial inconvenience. It represents economic catastrophe for millions of Americans who have no alternative income sources, no remaining working years, no ability to adjust their circumstances to accommodate reduced government support. The political system has known this crisis was approaching for decades. Every trustee report has warned about demographic pressures and funding shortfalls. Every presidential candidate has promised to protect Social Security while avoiding specific solutions. Every congressional session has featured proposals to address the crisis that die in committee because any real solution requires either benefit cuts that anger retirees or tax increases that anger workers. The mathematics of democracy make Social Security reform politically impossible until crisis forces immediate action. But the crisis isn't waiting for political consensus. It's accelerating through economic pressures that most Americans don't understand. Social Security's trust fund is invested exclusively in Treasury securities. The government borrows money from Social Security to fund current operations, then pays interest on that borrowing. This arrangement worked when interest rates were higher than inflation and government debt was manageable. Today, real interest rates are often negative, and the federal debt has reached levels that make Treasury securities an questionable investment for retirement security. The Federal Reserve's monetary policy creates additional pressures that compound Social Security's mathematical challenges. Low interest rates reduce the return on trust fund investments, while asset price inflation increases the cost of everything retirees need to purchase. Quantitative easing policies that boost stock markets and real estate values help Americans who own assets while devastating Americans who depend on fixed incomes. Social Security recipients watch their purchasing power erode while politicians celebrate economic recovery measured by metrics that don't reflect retiree economic reality. Healthcare costs represent another accelerating threat that official projections significantly underestimate. Medicare Part B premiums are automatically deducted from Social Security benefits. As healthcare inflation outpaces general inflation, Medicare premiums consume larger portions of Social Security payments. By 2030, Medicare premiums will absorb more than 15% of average Social Security benefits, compared to 7% today. The interaction between Medicare costs and Social Security benefits creates a death spiral where rising healthcare expenses reduce net Social Security income even without formal benefit cuts. But the demographic crisis extends beyond simple worker to retiree ratios. The baby boom generation retiring today accumulated more wealth than previous generations and expects higher living standards in retirement. They built careers during decades of economic expansion, purchased homes during periods of affordable real estate, accumulated 401k balances during bull markets. Their Social Security benefits were designed to supplement other retirement income sources. For many, Social Security was never intended to be primary retirement income. The generation entering the workforce today faces completely different economic circumstances. Student loan debt that previous generations never carried, housing costs that absorb larger portions of income, healthcare expenses that create financial stress throughout working years, gig economy employment that provides a regular income and minimal benefits. These workers will pay higher Social Security taxes to fund benefits for retirees who enjoyed more favorable economic conditions while building smaller retirement savings themselves, due to economic pressures that didn't exist for previous generations. The intergenerational wealth transfer embedded in Social Security assumes economic growth that generates sufficient tax revenue to fund growing benefit obligations. That assumption is breaking down as economic growth slows, income inequality increases, and technological change eliminates middle-class employment that historically funded Social Security through payroll taxes. Artificial intelligence and automation are reducing demand for human labor while increasing returns to capital ownership. Workers pay Social Security taxes on wages, while capital owners accumulate wealth through asset appreciation that is not subject to Social Security taxation. Corporate America has systematically shifted from defined benefit pensions to 401k retirement plans that transfer investment risk from employers to employees. This transition was supposed to create better retirement security through market participation. Instead, it created retirement insecurity for workers who lack financial expertise to manage investment portfolios while eliminating guaranteed pension income that supplemented Social Security benefits. The retirement security model that relied on three-legged stool of Social Security, pension income, and personal savings has collapsed into Social Security dependence for most Americans. Wall Street has built an entire industry around managing 401k assets while generating fees that reduce retirement savings. Financial advisors who promise to optimize retirement portfolios often charge fees that consume more wealth than their investment expertise creates. Target date funds that automatically adjust allocation based on retirement timeline charge expenses that compound over decades of accumulation. The financial services industry that was supposed to replace pension security has become a wealth extraction mechanism that leaves workers with smaller retirement resources while generating enormous profits for fund managers. Meanwhile, the political class continues pretending that Social Security reform can be delayed until after the next election. Republican politicians promise to protect current benefits while proposing future reforms that won't affect current voters. Democratic politicians promise to expand benefits while avoiding discussion of funding mechanisms. Both parties understand that honest Social Security reform requires either benefit reductions that anger current retirees or payroll tax increases that anger current workers. Neither party is willing to advocate solutions that create electoral consequences. The lobbying industry is mobilized around Social Security reform in ways that prevent rational policy discussion. AARP represents current retirees who want maximum benefits regardless of cost to future generations. Business groups oppose payroll tax increases that would fund benefit improvements. Financial services companies promote private account proposals that would generate investment management fees. Each constituency pushes for reforms that benefit their members while ignoring broader systemic stability. The result is political paralysis that guarantees crisis rather than gradual adjustment. International examples demonstrate that Social Security reform is possible when political systems accept mathematical reality. European countries have raised retirement ages, adjusted benefit formulas, and increased contribution rates to maintain pension system viability. These adjustments created short-term political costs, but preserved long-term retirement security. American political culture treats any Social Security modification as betrayal of sacred promises, rather than necessary adaptation to demographic and economic changes. But international comparisons reveal troubling patterns about American exceptionalism in retirement policy. Other developed countries provide universal health care that eliminates medical bankruptcy risk for retirees. They offer public transportation systems that reduce automobile dependence for elderly populations. They maintain affordable housing policies that prevent seniors from losing homes due to property tax increases. American retirees face health care, transportation, and housing costs that consume larger portions of retirement income while receiving Social Security benefits that were not designed to fund comprehensive retirement expenses. The crisis accelerates through feedback loops that compound initial problems. As Social Security becomes less reliable, Americans attempt to save more for retirement through 401k and IRA accounts. This increased saving reduces current consumption, which slows economic growth and reduces payroll tax revenue that funds Social Security. The attempt to solve retirement insecurity through personal savings creates economic conditions that worsen Social Security funding problems. Individual rational behavior produces collective irrationality that deepens systemic crisis. Geographic disparities in cost of living create additional complications that national Social Security policy cannot address effectively. Social Security benefits are calculated based on national wage averages, but must fund retirement expenses that vary dramatically across regions. Retirees in high-cost metropolitan areas receive benefits that provide subsistence living standards, while retirees in low-cost rural areas receive benefits that support comfortable lifestyles. The single national Social Security system cannot accommodate regional economic differences that affect retirement adequacy. State and local government pension systems face parallel crises that will interact with Social Security problems in catastrophic ways. Many public employees participate in pension systems instead of Social Security, assuming their pension benefits will provide retirement security. But state and local governments face unfunded pension liabilities exceeding $4 trillion while dealing with declining tax bases and increasing service obligations. When state pension systems collapse, millions of public employees will discover they have no Social Security benefits and no pension income. They will become dependent on federal programs designed for workers who contributed to Social Security throughout their careers. The housing market represents another dimension of retirement crisis that intersects with Social Security inadequacy. Many Americans assume their home equity will supplement retirement income through downsizing or reverse mortgages. But demographic trends suggest housing demand will decline as baby boomers attempt to sell homes to smaller generations with different housing preferences. The housing wealth that current retirees expect to access may not exist if housing prices decline when large numbers of retirees attempt to monetize real estate holdings simultaneously. Healthcare innovation creates paradoxical pressure on retirement systems that benefit from longer lifespans while struggling to fund extended benefit obligations. Medical advances that extend healthy aging represent tremendous social progress, but require retirement systems designed for shorter lifespans to fund longer benefit periods. The success of medical science in extending human life creates financial pressures on Social Security that were not anticipated when benefit formulas were designed. Living longer represents individual success, but collective fiscal challenge for programs that assume shorter retirement periods. Climate change will impose additional stresses on retirement systems that must adapt to environmental challenges while maintaining benefit adequacy. Extreme weather events that damage retiree housing, healthcare disruptions caused by climate-related disasters, migration patterns that separate retirees from family support networks. These environmental pressures will increase retirement costs while potentially reducing economic growth that generates tax revenue for Social Security funding. The interaction between environmental crisis and retirement crisis will compound both challenges. But beneath all these technical challenges lies a fundamental question about intergenerational justice and social responsibility. Current retirees receive Social Security benefits that exceed their lifetime contributions, plus interest by substantial margins. They pay Medicare premiums that cover approximately 25% of their healthcare costs, while younger Americans subsidize the remaining 75% through general tax revenue. The generation that benefited from economic expansion during the post-war boom expects younger generations to honor retirement promises, while those younger generations face environmental degradation, infrastructure decay, educational debt, and housing costs that previous generations never encountered. The mathematical crisis in Social Security reflects broader systemic breakdown in American governance institutions that cannot address long-term challenges because political incentives focus on short-term electoral cycles. The country that built interstate highways, landed astronauts on the moon, and created the internet cannot reform retirement programs that everyone acknowledges are mathematically unsustainable. The failure to address Social Security reflects institutional degradation that extends beyond budget mathematics to questions about democratic capability in addressing complex policy challenges. Yet the crisis also creates opportunities for fundamental reform that could improve retirement security rather than simply managing decline. Universal basic income programs could replace Social Security's complex benefit formulas with simple income guarantees. Healthcare reform that provides universal coverage could eliminate medical expenses that consume retirement savings. Housing policies that increase affordable senior housing could reduce retirement costs while improving quality of life for elderly Americans. Immigration reform that increases working age population could improve worker-to-retiree ratios that support Social Security funding. But these comprehensive reforms require political leadership willing to acknowledge that current retirement policies are fundamentally broken rather than temporarily inadequate. They require accepting that incremental adjustments cannot solve systemic problems that demand structural reorganization. They require honesty about intergenerational trade-offs rather than pretending that all promises can be kept without cost. They require economic thinking that goes beyond Social Security accounting to address comprehensive retirement security in a changing economy. The January 15th meeting in Baltimore concluded with a recommendation that senior administration officials prepare for crisis management rather than prevention. The mathematics had become impossible to ignore. The political timeline had shortened beyond the capacity for gradual reform, and the demographic pressures had reached levels that guaranteed dramatic disruption regardless of policy choices. The only remaining question was whether the crisis would be managed through deliberate policy choices, or whether it would unfold through chaotic benefit cuts and administrative breakdown. 67 million Americans depend on Social Security benefits that cannot be funded through current revenue sources. They will discover this reality in 2033 when their monthly checks automatically decrease by 23%. But the discovery will come too late for adjustment, too late for alternative planning, too late for the gradual transition that could have preserved retirement security while acknowledging mathematical constraints. The crisis that could have been managed through honest policy discussion will instead unfold through sudden benefit cuts that devastate retirement plans built around promises the government cannot afford to keep. The Social Security crisis represents more than actuarial mathematics or budget projections. It represents the end of the post-war social contract that promised secure retirement in exchange for lifetime employment and tax payments. It represents the failure of American political institutions to address long-term challenges that require sustained commitment beyond electoral cycles. It represents the transformation of retirement from guaranteed security to individual risk management in an economy that provides fewer opportunities for wealth accumulation while imposing higher living costs. The basement conference room in Baltimore, where this reality was acknowledged, is now empty. The officials who received these projections have returned to their offices to prepare public statements that emphasize Social Security as strength while avoiding discussion of its mathematical impossibility. The 67 million Americans whose retirement security depends on promises that cannot be kept continue planning retirements around benefits that will not exist. The crisis continues accelerating toward 2033, but the conversation that could address it remains politically impossible. The mathematics are final. The timeline is fixed. The consequences are certain. What remains uncertain is whether American political institutions can acknowledge reality before crisis forces, acknowledgement through benefit cuts that destroy retirement security for an entire generation of Americans who trusted government promises and planned their lives accordingly. The lights are still on in the Social Security Administration building. The computers continue calculating benefits and processing payments. The system continues functioning normally, providing the illusion of stability and permanence. But in that basement conference room, officials confronted numbers that reveal the approaching end of Social Security as Americans have known it for nearly a century. The crisis isn't coming. It's counting down month by month, payment by payment, toward a 2033 deadline that will transform American retirement from security to catastrophe. The only question remaining is whether anyone will tell the truth before it's too late to matter.